So next we will have Matt, I think, is our next person on our... So Matt is our first speaker from University of Southampton, and I know him from for many, many years, I think, Matt. We've kind of known each other on and off through digital Twitter, and we've been around the e-learning block many times. But more recently, because both our institutions use Blackboard, we meet up at Blackboard events. But over to Matt, who will share with us this idea of how we can be savvy when using non-institutional tools.
Thank you very much, Lillian, and hello, everyone. And so my name is Matt Deeprose from the University of Southampton. Please do save any questions until the end. And if you'd like to connect with me, I've put my links to everything that I refer to in the chat. So you've got those in there also on the Xerti. So the background to this is over the last year, I think we've always had this, but in particular over the last year, I've had more staff queries about attractive tools that we don't have or don't support. And they might even be tools that replicate functionality that we already have. And so there was a kind of increasing concern about what that meant in terms of student support if they had questions, and also privacy, sustainability, and of course, accessibility. So working with some colleagues, we've been doing a piece of work to first of all create some guidance and overview for staff about what to consider before they use a tool that isn't supported essentially by the university. And then based on what we learn from that, creating some criteria for assessing such tools to then make some recommendations of tools that are out there that we kind of feel should be good and safe to use, in inverted commas. And right now we're about finalizing our criteria, and we've just on Monday kind of soft launched our overview, which you should find the link in the chat there. And through the next slides, I'm just going to give you an overview of this overview, but of course there's much more detail on that web page. Standing on the shoulders of giants, and some giants in particular I'd like to shout out are Reading, who have some great resources about supporting third-party apps and tools, and Massachusetts have a very useful website where they not only talk about tools for teaching in terms of privacy and accessibility, but they also show how those tools align with the SAMR model: substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition, and also talks about what types of learning activities those tools are suitable for. In terms of our overview itself, we cover several different aspects. So first of all, looking at whether we already have a tool that might do something similar to what someone would want to use an unsupported tool for, or also considering what if staff or colleagues prefer using a tool rather than what we support. So it's important that staff know how to find what is available, which might be on our IT website or our e-learning guide, and letting them know that they should raise a ticket if they are still unsure whether it's something that we offer. In terms of if they were thinking about using a tool that's similar to what we have but not what we support, we really would want to know why. Particularly for our kind of planning. Also, there might be a way that we could improve the tool that we do have if we develop it ourselves, or send feature requests to the vendor. Or we looked at that tool and we found accessibility or privacy issues with that tool, and we might be able to share some lessons from that. In terms of data and privacy, I think maybe some colleagues won't know the kind of full spectrum of the work that's involved in rolling out a tool centrally within a university. For an example here, we would do an initial data protection review, which might then require a data privacy impact assessment, which is quite rigorous and then gets logged with our legal team. So I had a review of the Information Commissioner's Office kind of overview about these things, which is particularly useful, and trying to break it down to what I thought would be straightforward for colleagues who are obviously very busy to think about what to understand or what to think about. for if we were to say avoid using personal and sensitive information, so sensitive being special category data such as like health, ethnicity, those sorts of things, avoid putting those into that tool, telling others as well that this is something they should avoid doing, and ideally not making it compulsory to have to use that unsupported tool as part of, say, core teaching or something like that, only as an addition. That was checked by our legal team as well, by the way, checked the wording. Sustainability obviously is very important. And another aspect of what goes into providing a supported service is we would do like disaster recovery, set up backups, have support guides, helpline integrated with other university services, single sign-on authentication and so on. And those you don't necessarily get with an unsupported tool. Perhaps more importantly, the charging model might change. What would you do if that service was quickly withdrawn? I'm sure many of you are aware of different Google services that have been end-of-lifed. Despite many people really enjoying using them, I'm still mourning over Google Reader after all these years. So the overview kind of makes recommendations on about planning for those contingencies if you were to use an unsupported tool. Copyright and liability. The overview would ask you to consider whether you have to waive your moral rights, your rights to be identified as the author of content, or and your right to object to like derogatory use or treatment of that content, and would you retain ownership? There are some interesting aspects about ownership of content created with university tools, which I'm safely stepping away from and saying are out of scope of this presentation. Of course, accessibility might be the most important. So within the overview, we talk about our legal responsibility under the public sector body's accessibilities regulations, and we also have a section there that tries to answer that response you may sometimes hear, but I don't have any disabled students, so I don't need to worry about this. And to try to make it as straightforward as possible, we're saying make sure that the service or app has an accessibility statement that's up to date before using it. In terms of that overview guide, that kind of covers what we put into that guide, but of course the online version has much more detail. So right now we're finalizing that criteria for assessing further tools that we might then recommend. So I can share that draft criteria so far, what we're thinking. We're saying that the app should be free of charge, and any limitations should be about how much you can use the app, not for how long you can use it. So by that I mean, like, for example, a 100 megabyte limit or free user limit, but not you can use this for 30 days and then you're going to have to pay if you want to continue using it. That's definitely not sustainable. And if it were supported by advertising, that's acceptable, but we would want to be noting that. We'd also want to ensure that you're not required to submit personal or sensitive information before you can use it, as well as recommending not to put that in when you are using the app. And likewise, you wouldn't want to be using that for confidential information, research data, that kind of thing. Furthermore, we wouldn't be recommending apps which are alternatives to tools we do have university-wide supported, because we want to maximize the return on investment of our current offering and also provide a more coherent experience to staff and students. And of course that any app or service we would recommend should have an up-to-date accessibility statement. So far the overview's been shared and we're awaiting feedback. I've got a few final thoughts, like maybe, is it a bit too restrictive? Will it just be ignored? Time will tell, but that's where we're at. I'm not sure whether we break for questions now or we go straight to the next speaker, but that's what I wanted to share with you for now today. Thank you.